So if I were brave, I would do this whole video in an English accent, but it would turn like Australian and it would just be bad. So hey, 8.2, we're going to talk about why England was the home and the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. So that's going to be the basic story. So I hope your Christmas break is going swell. It may be over by the time you're watching this, so if that's the case, I hope your January is going swell. My break's going well. I replaced a light fixture in my house without electrocuting myself, which is always a good step. So again, why England? We're going to look at different reasons why the Industrial Revolution started in England, and then why does it not start on the continent of Europe, and when it does, how is industrialization a little different there. So this is really the page, right? If you want reasons why England is the home of the Industrial Revolution and the birthplace of it, this kind of gives you the idea in various ways. So I'm sure you can interpret all of those things without me having to talk to you about them. Let me see. I really like sitting here. Take a little field trip. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at the economic and social factors. So money and people, why do these things get the Industrial Revolution started here? The first thing is that the natural resources that are needed for Industrial Revolution success, they're already in England. So the resources that are needed to power these factories are found in England already. They don't have to be brought in. So we have a huge, not huge, but a good deposit of coal in the ground that the English can mine to bring to powering their factories. Iron ore, which will eventually be used for railroads and trains themselves. There's iron ore that's found in the ground. And obviously, England also has a lot of colonies that if they need to go and get something else, they have that access point to be able to get things. So they've got the materials they need. We also have a strong middle class already present in England. In order to have economic innovation, you need a class of people who are willing to invest money and have the incentive to invest money. The nobles already have their income. They earn that from the land. They earn that from their titles. They don't have the incentive necessarily to invest money in different business measures. Obviously, the peasants don't have the money necessary too, but if you have a strong middle class, those are the people that can invest in a factory being built. They can invest in a railroad company. They can invest in all sorts of things, and that can get the money flowing a lot easier. A lot of that wealth, of course, had been developed and facilitated through the Atlantic economy, through triangular trade, through mercantilism, and these things that had given England a strong economic base to which they could build in this new period. You also could look at the Protestant work ethic. I think that's kind of a minor reason, but the Puritan class certainly has that inherent need of having a work ethic. I don't think that's as big a reason here, but I think it's also something that doesn't hurt. So when you have middle class that are Puritans, that's certainly not all the middle class, but it's also an aspect of English society. You also, and this may be the most important thing, I think, economically speaking, you have a government that is not afraid to let the economy do its thing, a laissez-faire government in terms of economic development. Parliament was okay to permit economic growth without regulating those businesses, or those factories. So they were okay. Oh, darkness. They were okay with allowing these businesses to say, okay, we want to do X, Y, and Z with our factory. And Parliament would be like, you know what? Go for it, right? We're not going to stand in the way. Now, as we're going to see, that has some potential. Oh, I thought I just saw a ghost. I guess not. That was a little scary. So they have some, like, what was I talking about? Parliament permitting work, permitting economic growth to happen without regulation. The no regulation is going to have a little bit of a negative later on. However, here at the beginning, Parliament is willing to step back and say, all right, businesses Factories, you can do kind of whatever you want without us standing in the way to protect anybody. So again, a laissez-faire government. And also keep in mind, a lot of Parliament's members could stand to gain from this economic growth. So you have gentry and you also have upper middle class people who are starting to fill Parliament. So keep in mind that Parliament, in many cases so far throughout our class, yes, it's not a king, but they're also going to be acting kind of to promote their own benefit. And that in many cases would be business growth and economic growth, since the classes that make up Parliament stand to gain from that. So keep that in mind. So I'm at this angle, you see like 3 tens. I'm sorry, I know that's offensive. So, okay. So, economic and social factors, mostly economic there, but certainly the resources present, and then the middle class and Parliament willing to let things go. Technological factors. I might also want to note, I don't know if I call this out later, but take a look at the map. Look at all the rivers that are present in England. You cannot go in England, you cannot go 90 miles in one direction without finding a major water source, be it a river or the ocean or the channel or whatever. So water being a primary reason and ability to power machines early on in factories early on in the revolution, it was key to have that water there to generate water power. Right. Technological factors. Okay, coal is used to power steam engines. You have a man named James Watt in the late 1700s who is going to perfect a design by a man named Thomas Newcomen, which is a steam engine. And that steam engine is not necessarily going to be important in the factories themselves, but taking goods from place to place inside of the country. You know, if you put this in a boat, if you put the steam engine in a boat, now you can sail upriver, not just downriver, right? You couldn't sail upriver before without having a lot of man strength to, like, you know, raft up the river. But now you put that steam engine in the boat, and zoop, now you can go forward and expand trade in multiple directions. And James Watt is the one that perfects the design to make that happen. You also engage in a period called the Transportation Revolution, in which we are changing the way that people are moving around. Canals are developed. Roads are, in essence, paved for the first time. We mentioned James Watt and the steam engine. Steamboats, two-way travels on rivers. And technological advances create economic advantages. Now we can expand trade and trade things faster in higher quantities and move them at a cheaper rate instead of having to horse and buggy it everywhere. All of a sudden, goods are going from place to place a lot faster than before. People can make a lot of money from that. So technology playing a huge role in the Industrial Revolution with the steam engine, but technology blows up with the creation of the railroad. You talk about a game-changing invention. George Stephenson in 1825 develops what was known as the first commercial railroad, the first commercial train, locomotive as it was called. It was called Rocket, and it could zip along as fast as 16 miles per hour. I think Piper did that. Right, Piper? Yeah. Hopefully you saw him. I was going no with that camera angle. So, the first locomotive rocket could go as fast as 16 miles per hour. Again, railroads are changing the way countries work. England first. It is a cheaper mode of transportation than water. So now we had steamboats, put a little steam engine in there, choo-choo up the river, but the railroads were a cheaper and more efficient way of transporting things. They allow for new markets, transporting items to new places. You don't have to depend on water to transport goods from place to place. Now you can, in a famous city not on a body of water, could be accessible via trade via these railroads. It offered transportation from the country to the city. So now people living outside of the city limits could travel quickly and efficiently into the city from more of the rural areas. It develops the idea of on time, right? So much of our culture is controlled by the clock. You start to see that more when you have the railroad developed, and people know I have to be at the railroad station at this time to get on the train. And that idea of the clock controlling how we live, the railroad did a lot to advance that, right? Back in your rural early modern Europe, you just basically sun up, sun down. It wasn't a big deal. You didn't have to be anywhere at any point. And now the railroad, for transportation purposes and for trade purposes, developed the idea of on time. It also makes the world smaller. It's going to create opportunities for cultures to interact that wouldn't before, and that, of course, will bring different consequences as well. It also, and this is kind of a minor thing, but it reinforces class divisions. First class here, second class on this train, third class on this train. So people become more cognizant of what class they're actually in, and in the ability to kind of go and visit different places if they can see how other people live, and that can kind of give you a little bit of consciousness about how you're living as well. So the railroad is a huge, huge turning point in terms of social, economic, technological changes, and perhaps political changes down the road. So if we look at Great Britain in 1850, before we do that, let me go back to our slide here at the beginning just to make sure that I've hit all of these things. So I talked about the rivers, right? Yeah, there's some things here I haven't mentioned or I didn't get to. So we talked about the rivers being one of the reasons why it happens there. The price revolution, which is a kind of a byproduct of the commercial revolution, the rise in prices, encouraged people to get into business to sell to make money. Britain actually limited access that their inventors and their industrial developers could leave the country. And they basically threatened them. The government threatened them and said, hey, you can't leave and share the secrets with other countries about what we're doing. Hands-off government, laissez-faire parliament, which let the business leaders do what they wanted to do without regulation. Your steam engine, colonies, the enclosure movement, okay, a labor source of the peasants moving to the cities and some needing work through the cottage industry. We've already talked about that process. This guy we'll talk about in a minute. He should look familiar. Your railroads and coal, and then perhaps the Protestant work ethic. One of my favorite images there. I think that's funny. All right, so we talked about economic and social. Let's go and look at Great Britain then in the year 1850. Okay, so this is kind of a culmination of the Industrial Revolution in England, about how it created a powerhouse, basically. Great Britain, tiny island, right, in connection with or in context with the whole world, produces 2/3 of the world's coal, a half of the iron, and a half of the world's cotton cloth. That's insane, right? I mean, this tiny island has become an economic powerhouse, and from that will become a political powerhouse, all driven by the Industrial Revolution. GNP, gross national product, over the course of 50 years grows 350%. It's 3.5 times bigger than it was before. So say your business is worth $20, okay? Eventually, after 50 years, you have so much growth, it's now worth 70. So it shows you the incredible increase of financial power that England will have thanks to the Industrial Revolution. And because of that, it becomes the most powerful economic power in the world. Now, to kind of show and illustrate their strength, the World's Fair hit England in about the year 1850. And one of the things, it might have not been the World's Fair, some sort of technological festival. And one of the ways that the English middle class decided to show strength was the construction of this building called the Crystal Palace, which was built in South London to illustrate Great Britain's industrial strength. And at this festival, they showed all these technological achievements that the British were thinking about and developing. So the Crystal Palace was there to showcase that industrial power, that industrial strength that Britain had. The Crystal Palace burned down, I think it was in the 30s or 1930s, sometime around there. There is a quite prominent English football team named Crystal Palace, is in the Premier League, perhaps to eulogize and remember that building. But it was basically all glass, you can kind of see from this image, or it's the name Crystal Palace, and again was shown and constructed to show industrial strength. The question is, why not everywhere else? Like, if England, certainly in the first part of our class, is a powerful country, but they're probably not the most powerful country on average. So why not other places until after the year 1815? Well, the most obvious is that, and we mentioned the British government forbidding innovators from spreading secrets, so they don't really go abroad and like say, hey, here's what we're doing. But meanwhile, on the continent, you got some chaos, right? First of all, you got the French Revolution. which is brought chaos to France. The French, I love French, to France and Prussia and Austria and these countries, which are fighting those revolutionary wars to stop the revolution. But you also have the Napoleonic Wars, where Napoleon is at war for most of his reign. So these countries are too busy putting resources into the military to worry and do much industrialization. And your middle class is not quite as strong in those countries as it is in England. Remember, in France, the middle class, the bourgeoisie, traditionally pay taxes and are privileged underneath the first two estates. And as far as Eastern Europe goes, and the Prussia and Austria, and even further from that, the middle class is not as strong. So certainly the conditions weren't there to be strong and develop industrialization. Now, Europe eventually is going to build their factories, but it's only going to take a little bit of time. You're going to see it in waves, basically. First of all, first wave is in Western Europe. Okay, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and a shout out the United States. I'm going to put the year, let's say 1830. Okay, so that's kind of a good idea of when industrialization really grows in those countries. Okay, second wave, we're going to say Germany, and that includes the German states, Prussia, Austria, and Italy. And we're going to say mid-19th century there. Okay, so mid-19th. I would say for Italy, I would put northern Italy. Okay, certainly not southern Italy. So Germany and Italy, countries that are not unified yet, but in those regions, you're going to see industrialization in the 19th century. And the last group, Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and Russia, that would include Poland and let's see, what else would be over there? The Ottoman Empire, to a degree, and of course Russia. You're going to wait till about the early 20th century until you see a real strong wave of industrialization there. So Western Europe, you see it more. Eastern Europe, you see it less. And what do you have to have? Industrialization is the farther east you go across the continent, the more, or the farther east you go, the less middle class there's going to be. So here's a general rule. This is something that's going to come in relevant later. West, I don't know how to write this, middle class. More. Okay, so again, the more west you go in Europe, the more middle class you're going to get. And that's going to impact them politically, too. We'll get into that in Unit 9. But the more west you go, the more middle class. And if you're going to industrialize, you've got to have that middle class there who will push to invest their monies into factories because they have the most incentive and ability to do so. Now, why did Southern Europe struggle? First of all, they have lack of resources. Agriculturally, Eastern and Southern Europe is awesome. Russia as well. But they don't have the coal and the hard metals to be able to compete that way. You also have lack of government support, but that's another deal. Okay, so the industrialization assistance. You're going to see in Europe, and by Europe I mean not England, okay, so you're going to see on the continent much more government support of industry, okay? Government is going to give their money to construct railroads and canals. In England, it's private industry, okay? Okay, so England, private. Private means that these are non-government people who are giving their money to joint stock companies and such to construct these things. Whereas on the continent, you've got much more government influence. Large central banks provide means to invest. Credit Mobile is one bank in France that helps pay for industrialization. And then you have also free trade zones and foreign tariffs to protect industries inside the country. So let me explain. First of all, foreign tariffs. What that means is that if I am a French business, say I make scissors, okay? My government then is going to put a tax on any other scissor-making company and their products that are not French. So say you have a French scissors and say you have German scissors. Okay? The French government will put a tax on the German scissors so that it helps my French company, my home company, right? So that's what you're going to see a lot of, are companies saying, we want to protect our own industries, right? This is kind of mercantilist in a way. Protect our own industries to encourage people to buy them so it develops our industries, so people don't go outside and buy the products from the outside because those are taxed, right? Foreign tariffs. Now, the last thing, free trade zones. Kind of the same deal is that you're going to go with no tariffs, but you're wanting to encourage trade with a certain place. The best example of this is called the Zollverein in Germany. So what this was, and you can see the years there, kind of mid-19th century, these were your German states getting into an agreement with each other, saying, we're not going to put tariffs on each other's products. We're going to trade openly with one another and have free trade, to where, hey, if I'm in Bavaria, I can buy products in Prussia without having to pay any sort of tax. Now, that's great to kind of encourage like economic cooperation, but let's consider that also perhaps can create economic unity. If you're trading with the other states that, yeah, you're not politically affiliated, right? Bavaria, Saxony, and Prussia, and Hanover are different German states, but hey, now we're trading as though we are the same people. Something to keep in mind a little bit later. Okay? No, I'm going to discard this. Okay, so that's kind of it. I mean, why England? But even more, another question is, why not? Why not the rest of the continent? So a lot of good stuff there. In section 8.3, we're going to look at the social impact of the Industrial Revolution, how it impacts working conditions, family conditions, social classes, blah, 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 and the like. So why England? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Why not the continent? Make sure and understand why not the continent, and then eventually what industrialization looks like on the continent. So, peace. Bye.